Hi, everyone. My name is Tess Kelly. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for our group's capstone project titled Sustainable Model Transit-Oriented Development and Policy. And today I'm going to be presenting on behalf of my entire team. So our client is the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, a 28-year-old nonprofit policy and advocacy organization dedicated to reducing dependency on traditional cars in the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut areas. They defined our problem as the following, that automobile transportation has been unsustainable from a land use, climate, social justice, and environmental standpoints. This has resulted in urban sprawl for the majority of New Jersey, where the average traffic time is well above the national average. In addition, as many of you know, auto-centric transportation increases greenhouse gas emissions and smog and negatively impacts air quality and human health. So the client asked that we deliver several equitable transit-oriented development policies. For the rest of the presentation, you'll hear me refer to it as TOD. So several equitable TOD policy recommendations that could be implemented at any New Jersey locality level. In addition, provide examples of existing TOD within New Jersey that could be replicated in other areas of the state. And lastly, deliver several recommendations of towns where there is a need for TOD and it could be successful. So to achieve this, they outlined 3 tasks, which was task 1, a literature review of equitable domestic and international TOD models. Task 2 is a case study review of existing New Jersey TOD and existing funding models. And the goal of these 2 tasks is to determine which conditions led these models to be successful, which will help us with our task 3, which is identifying potential future TOD locations in New Jersey along the Raritan Valley line. So we divided into 3 research groups to complete these tasks. In addition, during our midterm briefing, our client also asked that we provide information on how New Jersey will benefit from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So we created an additional smaller team to research that information. In addition to our research, we were very lucky to conduct several amazing stakeholder interviews that included interviews with the mayors of Westfield and Cranford, financial advisor to Fanwood, New Jersey, employees of New Jersey Transit and Regional Plan Association, and the director of economic development for Somerville, New Jersey. So our team 1 studied the implementation of TOD policies for 4 areas, which were Chicago, Portland, Perth, Australia, and Stockholm, Sweden. These cities were chosen because they are highly regarded examples of TOD, and they provided us a wide variety of transportation models and policies. So some of the key takeaways from this research includes 1, learning that Portland removed parking minimums for all new construction housing development. And this led to reducing high levels of congestion and in turn led to greater use of public mass transit and micromobility. Secondly, from Chicago and Perth, we learned that enabling successful equitable TOD is possible. However, it must be done with explicit policies that mandate things such as affordable housing and expand accessible transit to all areas. In addition, the Perth case study highlighted the importance of engaging with community members and stakeholders that will be involved in and affected by a project. For example, Perth made an entire committee with employees of different government agencies and community members for TOD projects that were being proposed. And lastly, dense development is a key factor to increasing the walkability of a city or town, and in addition, the ridership of public transit, and this was seen in both Portland and Stockholm. So our team 2 looked at existing New Jersey transit villages. So New Jersey has a transit village program that regulates TOD within the municipalities, and team 2 researched 11 of these transit villages. In this research, we observed that successful TOD requires a pro-development and pro-mass transit government with a long-term vision for implementing improvements. So some of the key lessons learned from this research included that TOD increases the demand for local services and spurs the local economy. TOD in New Jersey is typically seen in wealthier areas. And lastly, TOD projects, at least in New Jersey, seem to be mainly implemented at the municipality level with support from private developers. So through the research of tasks 1 and 2, we created 6 criteria for areas along the Raritan Valley line of New Jersey that should see the greatest benefits from TOD implementations. And this allowed us to complete task 3, which, as I mentioned, is recommending locations for development. And the 6 criteria are as follows: population, low-income neighborhoods, access to transit, development potential, car dependency, and economic revitalization potential. So our team 3 looked at quantitative data associated with these criteria to locate potential areas around train stations in New Jersey to implement TOD. Team 3 developed 20 metrics for our criteria, including population density, walking score, and daily transit ridership, to measure and rank each category among the stations of the Raritan Valley line. They used this data to create a straight ranking system to determine areas most amenable to TOD, which fell into our Tier 1 recommendations: Somerville, Bound Brook, Dunellen, Plainfield, Netherwood, and Westfield. They then used, before I actually go to that, they then used GIS technology to recommend particular areas near the Tier 1 stations for development. Now moving on to our finance team, they researched the US infrastructure bill, and they found that New Jersey is expected to receive $4.1 billion in funding over the next 5 years to improve public transit. In addition, New Jersey is home to the most brownfields in America with 542, and the state is expected to receive $5 billion to remediate these brownfields and have them be used for potential development sites. Some of the grants that are applicable to the areas we are recommending in the report include the Rural Area Formula Grant, which provides funds to areas with populations of 50,000 or less. And secondly, which is to me very interesting, is the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant. And this is $1.5 billion going towards transit-oriented development, with 15 million at least going to areas of persistent poverty. And of the areas we're recommending, Plainfield and Netherwood qualify to apply for these grants. So in summary, based upon our research and findings, we propose the following. We recommend implementing TOD in the Tier 1 station areas, with particular emphasis on our top 3, which were Plainfield, Dunellen, and Somerville. As for our policy recommendations, the first one being removing required parking minimums for new housing developments. This has been done in several areas of New Jersey already, such as Cranford, New Jersey. In addition to that, mandating affordable housing. So the city of Asbury, New Jersey, for example, mandates that 20% of new housing development be dedicated to affordable housing. And lastly, requiring that all municipalities that apply to be a transit village have a committee dedicated to community engagement, something similar to what we saw with Perth. And this one particular policy would be something that has to be advocated at the state level, as this is a program run by the DOT of New Jersey. So a project is not complete without its challenges. Some of ours included that it was hard finding equitable examples of TOD in New Jersey. Secondly, this might be something other groups relate to, is time constraint. There were certain aspects of our research we wanted to explore more, but we're unfortunately unable to because of our timeline. And then lastly, the initial scope given to us by the client was very broad. It took a bit of time to narrow down our scope of work, but in the end, we were able to do that. As for the pros and cons of our recommendation, one thing I'd like to note is that our ranking system is a straight rank given equal weight. We acknowledge that some data points may be more valuable than others. Secondly, we acknowledge the difficult transition from car-centric areas to pro-mass transit and walkable neighborhoods. We acknowledge this is not a transition that happens overnight, nor do we ever recommend it to. We list several policies and details about how transit-oriented development should take. And as for our pros, which we believe outweigh our cons, The cities we recommend have a variety of income levels. So for example, Plainfield, Denellen, and Netherwood are lower income neighborhoods, while Somerville, Bound Brook, and Westfield are higher income. And we wanted to give the client a diversity of recommendations as per their request. Secondly, all suggested policies can be implemented pretty much for the most part at any locality level, except for that one I stated earlier. And they have shown signs of success and increase in revenues. And lastly, which is probably the most important part, is we offer a variety of policy and grant recommendations within our report that combat the issue of gentrification that can be seen when you try to implement new development in a lower income area. And with that, I thank you. And I'm happy to elaborate on anything I stated and answer any questions.
Great presentation, thank you. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the ranking system. I figured you probably were expecting a question on that. Yeah, for slide 8, I believe.
Yes.
If you mind just elaborating what this ranking at the bottom means, or your general methodology with coming up with that.
Yes, so we did anticipate, or at least we're hoping for a question on this, as there was a lot of time put into this analysis by our team 3. So essentially what you're looking at are areas that are in need of TOD. So Plainfield, for example, you'll see in green, the population is high and the economic revitalization color is wide in both of those color blocks. And it's because Plainfield has a lot of lower income neighborhoods that could benefit from transit development projects, but have not, which is why in our report we state grants that are out there for neighborhoods like Plainfield and Netherwood who don't necessarily have the community funds to implement new projects. So a lot of what you're looking at here, at least the high ranking ones, are neighborhoods that are in need of TOD, and we saw where it could be implemented there. I can elaborate more if it didn't fully answer your question. Okay. All right. Okay.
Question, if that's all right.
Cool. Yeah.
So the grants that you mentioned, like the
Mhm.
$15 million for the low income areas, like where exactly is that money going? What is kind of the tangible recommendation there for like actually directing that money?
Yeah, so that's really going to depend on the scale of the project. I will be honest, these grants are competitive. Obviously, every town and city in the nation wants free money. But we do list some smaller scaled projects. Like I said, we focus on 3 top areas that are not too expensive. Like you wouldn't be able to implement like a whole new train line and station with that money. You could revitalize your downtown with that money, new storefronts, make it more walkable, make it more inviting for people to come. Those are like the more smaller scale and more realistic project implementations. Anything further than that is run by New Jersey Transit, and you have to take that to them. So you're welcome. All right, thanks everyone.